I'm Jon Parkman. Welcome to Sugarloaf Ridge State Park. We come out today, it's a little bit windy, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me okay, but we've come out to look at some rocks. And we're starting with this one. This is Franciscan Graywacke, one of my favorites, partly because I just love that name, Graywacke. The Franciscan Formation is millions of years old. And in addition to Graywacke, it includes other sandstones and slates and shales, and then some metamorphic rocks. And we'll hopefully have time today to look at some of those. But the Graywacke, this rock is anywhere between 90 and about 140 million years old. So it dates back to the late Jurassic and the early Cretaceous period. Now, when this rock was made, there were dinosaurs on the land. Now, not right here, because in California, when this rock was created, we were underwater. To see actual dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus Rex, you had to go inland further to the east, more or less where the Rocky Mountains are today. And if you went there, you'd see lots and lots of dinosaurs. But here, in this part of California, when this Graywacke was being created, if you looked up, you'd see some incredible marine reptiles. Ichthyosauri, Pliosaurus, things that kind of look like the Loch Ness Monster swimming over our heads. But they're not out here anymore. So if you were to go back 140 million years ago, 200 million years ago, during the Jurassic, there was a landmass out at sea west of where we're at now. I call that Cascadia. It's no longer there. It's disappeared now. It was a little part of the bits and pieces of the supercontinent that we call Pangaea, when Pangaea was still together, before the 7 continents drifted out and became what we know today as our planet Earth. But Cascadia was a little broken piece, and when it rained and the wind blew, it knocked pieces, sediments of that mass off, and they went into the sea, and they went down to the bottom of the ocean, and they became our sedimentary rocks. And what happened with the Graywacke and rocks like it is they got pushed down into a deep trench under the ocean. And then millions of years later, they moved back up, and as the water receded and the landmass rose, the rock came up. Now, when the rock came up, this land was covered with Franciscan rocks. And in addition to Graywacke, we also have other sandstones. This is actually called a muddy sandstone, but we have other sandstones and shales, and then we have some metamorphic rocks like our state mineral, Serpentine, that are part of that same formation. Years later, millions of years later, we had uplift. We had volcanoes came up and created the next series of rocks we'll talk about in just a little bit later. The Sonoma Volcanics, and those are the igneous rocks. This is a sedimentary rock. We're going to talk about igneous rocks as well. And when the volcanoes came, they put lava out on this land. And then, several million years ago, our Coast Range woke up and rose. The mountains rose up, and they pushed through all these lava fills and all these sediment beds, and they broke the rocks apart. So now we just see a haphazard arrangement of rocks on this landscape, including this rock right here. But I close my eyes and touch this Graywacke, and I think about what this area was like millions of years ago, underwater with these beautiful critters swimming overhead. Now, let's go look at some igneous rocks. So now, I want to show you a serpentine boulder. This is serpentine. This is part of the Franciscan Formation. Just like the Graywacke we saw earlier, it's millions of years old. 90, maybe 150 million years old. It's a metamorphic rock. It's been created by a lot of pressures and kind of like boiling a stew. Serpentine. What makes this especially nice, especially interesting for me, is that this is California's official state mineral. So if you take a look at this serpentine rock, especially this really slick part here, kind of bluish-green color, when you see this when it's wet, you're sometimes reminded of the underbelly of a serpent. And I think that's why this is called serpentine. So the last rock we saw, the Serpentine, was part of the Franciscan Formation. And once again, the Franciscan Formation is mostly a sedimentary formation. The Serpentine is actually a metamorphic. But the Graywacke we saw earlier and some of the other sandstones and limestones out here are sedimentary rocks. So they were formed on the bottom of the ocean. When the ocean receded and the land came up and dried, you had these sedimentary rocks across the landscape. When the next series of rocks, the Sonoma Volcanic rocks, were created 9 million years ago, they broke through the Franciscan, and then the molten lava from the volcanoes went out and covered over. So you had a basement rock of Franciscan Formation rocks like Graywacke that were sedimentary rocks, and on top of that you had these igneous rocks created by volcanic activity. Now we're going to go look at some of those, what I would call hot rocks, the rocks that were created by volcanoes. They're not hot anymore. They've been cool now for 9 million years, but once they were molten lava. Let's go take a look. So now we're going to look at our third rock today. This is an igneous rock. This is a andesitic basalt. It's from the Sonoma Volcanics. And right here, I perched on top of this, is a piece of rhyolite. Rhyolite and andesite are related. They're both igneous rocks, and they're both part of the Sonoma Volcanics. Now, the Sonoma Volcanics is another rock formation. We talked about the Franciscan Formation earlier, which is 90 to 150 million years old, Jurassic and Cretaceous. Sonoma Volcanics, these rocks are late Miocene. They were created about 9 million years ago by volcanic activity. There was a volcano here. We don't know where today. We don't see it. It's long gone. I think it was about 6 or 7 miles south of us here, based on what I know about the geology. These rocks were once lava. They were hot, molten lava. And they came out of the volcano as lava flows. They spread across the land, and then they hardened into hard ribbons of rock. So before we say goodbye, I'd just like to thank my director, Jon Parkman.